everyone. Welcome to my show, CurryUp Leadership Podcast, a podcast to spotlight purpose-driven Asian leaders making an impact. And this is your host, Priyanka Komla, joining you on our 105th episode of CurryUp Leadership Podcast. We're super excited to have a very special guest on our show. But before I unveil my special guest, a quick reminder to follow me, Priyanka Komla, and a CurryUp Leadership Podcast page on LinkedIn to receive your LinkedIn live notifications whenever we go live every Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. For the folks who are watching this on YouTube, give us a subscribe and a like. For all the podcast lovers streaming on any podcast platform anywhere around the world, please leave us a review and a rating so we know how this podcast is helping you become a better version of yourself. And now for my special guest. There you go. Samira Khan. Hey, Samira. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Priyanka. How are you?
I'm doing great. So excited to be with you today. And it's a fun Sunday morning, I should say, for me back here in Washington, D.C. And I'm so glad you're joining us from Sacramento.
Awesome. I'm excited about this.
Thank you. To our live listeners who are watching this worldwide, please leave a quick hello and the country that you're tuning in from. And we have an amazing giveaway. We have a free one-on-one with Samira Khan, the social tech change maker. So feel free to put your name in the hat to win that free exclusive session with Samira. All right, Samira, I'm going to introduce you to my listeners because I know you are accomplished in your own way. But hey, why not read your accomplishments back to you once? Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. So to our listeners, Samira Khan works at the intersection of social, innovation, impact, and tech at Salesforce.org. She has worked across organizations, corporations, governments, and the social sector for over 13 years on innovative solutions to solving some of society's greatest challenges. She's especially interested in business model innovations for good. Her work spans the Americas, Middle East, and Asia. She's a former strategy management consultant, and while at A.T. Kearney in Southeast Asia, she played a lead role in starting and building its social impact organization. Well, as we also know, she's passionate about topics related to gender and youth empowerment towards the sustainable development goals. This episode is going to be special to me for two reasons. I've followed Samira's work for a very long time and have been, very excited to bring her onto the show for the last few months. And the two reasons why I'm excited is one, to unveil the other dimension of Samira outside of her accolades, who she is as a person, as a mother, as a daughter, because we could relate to a lot of, some of her life memories. And the second aspect is, some of the exciting opportunities and challenges that exist in the social and the tech space that she can share with our listeners. And as a bonus, we're going to understand how it is to be an Asian, as a woman of color, as she's looking at acing these professional milestones. So we're super excited to have you on the show again, Samira.
Thank you so much, Priyanka.
Thank you. All right. So let me start with this, Samira. Our parents play a very important role in our lives. They help us become who we are as we shape our identity. And I know you have very fond, nostalgic memories of your parents, especially your dad. Tell us a little bit more about the impact of your dad in your life.
Absolutely. So my parents certainly had a profound impact on my life. My father was one of my earliest and greatest co-creators, collaborators, mentors, advisors, as young as sort of 4 or 5 years old. I remember I wrote my first poem with him when I was in first grade, and he was right there by my side. So every school project I had, he was very hands-on, always a thought partner to me. But I think the greatest thing is that he believed in endless possibilities for me from a very young age, before I had even demonstrated any success, any knack for anything. So the fact that he believed in endless possibilities for me gave me a lot of confidence. And I kind of thought back and reflected on that and rely on that. And even today, he passed away in 2015. Even today, when I'm trying to make a big decision in life about my career or about something else, I often think, what would my father say? What advice would he give me? I mean, he was a dreamer. he was also a writer. So although professionally he was in the finance industry when he was in college, he wrote for the papers. And one thing I love to do is write, journalistic writing, creative writing. So we also very much connected at an artistic level or in an artistic way. And he loved to travel, and travel has very much been a part of my work as well as a part of my life. So in so many ways, he has played a huge role in my life and influences me till this day in spirit. My mother, extremely hardworking, very, very loyal, extremely committed, and incredibly generous. So I think my mother has done a lot for me in terms of my figuring out what my purpose is and thinking beyond just achievements and milestones and accomplishments and thinking about what am I giving back to my family? What am I giving back to my community? And staying centered in love, I think very much comes from my mother. I haven't yet sort of reached the same level she has, but she's to this day an influence in not only my life, but the life of my children as well.
I'm quite sure your dad must be proud of seeing you grow and bloom into this wonderful person.
Yeah, I know. He was always there just till his last days asking me, so what's your next plan? What are you thinking about? And, he had to learn, right? Social impact wasn't a career. It was about let's be a doctor or a lawyer or something. He had to learn about what it is that I do and kind of where sort of the sweet spot is for me. And he supported me from where I was sitting. So it was actually quite beautiful and brilliant to see that play out, especially in his final years.
That's very amazing to hear. And I'm so glad you're continuing his legacy by being a wonderful human and a mom to your kids as well.
Thank you, Priyanka.
All right. So we have a live listener. We have Satya who's joining us from India. Hi, Satya. Welcome to the show. So let's talk about social impact. That's something that I wanted to decode on this episode. How do you define social impact as a change maker, Samira?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it does come up a lot because there are so many different related terms. But I think simply put, social impact is having a positive change on society. Each person is coming from a different place and from a different context and might define their own personal purpose differently. So it's going to manifest differently for each person. I think if you think of social impact in a corporate setting, it's also about mitigating negative harms and negative risks of industry as much as it is about the contribution, the positive contribution to society. So I think that's good framing to keep in mind. And in terms of as a change maker, it's really about bringing your strengths and your power to bear on a problem that you want to solve. So by strengths, I mean, your relationships, your knowledge, your sort of understanding of a certain community, a certain context. And the topic could be different. It could be climate, it could be education, whatever speaks to you most. All of that to me constitutes social impact. I think similarly, corporations are also bringing their various assets to bear, their human capital, which is their people, their financial capital, their investments, their grants, etc., and their products to bear on a problem. So it's very unique to a certain situation.
That's very important, defining, what sectors actually contribute to social impact. Now, what are some challenges you see in this tech space, as an Asian woman, as a woman of color?
Yeah, so I think the challenges in the tech space are sort of bubbling up and very much coming to the surface in some of the national and domestic conversations taking place in the US. There is a strong sort of, I think, undercurrent of, I don't want to call them stereotypes, but assumptions that need to be broken, that women and communities need to break through. And it very much lies in narratives and storytelling. The narratives and stories we tell about particular communities and who they are and what they bring to the table and how we unpackage their history. So, for example, to make it a little bit more specific, as an Asian woman, often the assumption is that I am either, more quiet or I like to do certain types of work. And that, some other types of work are more for other populations, or other people might do them better. So I think just bringing to life all the different types of Asian women there are, what they bring to the table, their stories, their career journeys, their histories is very important, as well as just people taking the time to really re-examine their own biases and getting to know people across the table. So I think, yeah, because I've noticed that in tech in particular, if you look at the highest rung of leadership, you'll see very few, let's say, Asian women. And representation does matter. As younger women think about growing at that company, or think about growing in tech. So how do we highlight those role models, for lack of better words, or those stories, so that women think that they can do it? So I think it's both. Sort of the onus lies both amongst the population. So the onus lies with me, and it also lies with others, so that bridge is built between the two groups, and we can kind of eliminate some of the false assumptions around women prioritizing family over career, or around Asian women being sort of put together a certain way and not willing to have courageous conversations or challenge authority, etc. These are just some examples.
That's very impressive. And you brought the point that, building that bridge is very important. Now, when we look at your career, Samira, you have 13 plus years of experience spanning across corporations and government. What is one advice that's worked really well that you would love to give to Asian women in the tech space?
I would say be bold is what I had thought of. I think, this question has come up before. I think there is a lot of holding back, and it's a little bit cyclical in that, when you're not viewed a certain way, then you hold back. And because you hold back, you're increasingly not viewed that way, and you're not given as much opportunity. So I would say be bolder than you're comfortable with. I would think that is the advice that I would give, because the worst that could happen is somebody could say no, or counter you, or bring up a different opinion. So that would be my main advice, and to really, really push yourself outside of your comfort zone.
Be bold. I love it. And I would reiterate to our listeners, write it down. It's a golden nugget from Samira. Now let's talk about Salesforce, which is where you've had your predominant part of your career as well. How is Salesforce contributing to social impact?
Yeah, many, many different ways. That's a wonderful question. So I sit at salesforce.org, which is one of several social impact centers at Salesforce. For us, our focus is very much on this tech for social impact and tech for social change portfolio. So we have a number of products that are oriented towards social impact, either because the customer is in the social sector, such as nonprofits or educational institutions, or because we are trying to deepen impact, such as with Philanthropy Cloud. And Philanthropy Cloud's main customer is a corporation, and we're helping corporations track volunteerism, givings, etc. So outside of that, though, Salesforce is really, truly bringing all of its assets to bear to use business as a platform for change. So we have an impact fund that sits under Salesforce Ventures that invests in a number of areas, education, workforce development, tech for change, etc. We have a global philanthropy and engagement arm that does grant making in education and workforce development. We have relationships with key intergovernmental organizations, such as the World Economic Forum as well. So we have these different pockets of social impact, and we're really trying to inspire our employees to give back. So huge focus on citizen philanthropy. We get a certain number of days of paid leave to just volunteer. So we bring our human capital to bear. I already mentioned some of the financial capital elements. I mentioned the product, and then the culture which wraps around the entire sort of infrastructure that is giving back and trying to make the world a better place. So a lot of messaging from leadership, and the culture flows top down as well as bottoms up.
Three things that really stood out distinctly for me, Samira, as you spoke about philanthropy at Salesforce is, one is the culture, and two, it's the human capital, because people also need to be interested in, volunteering and spreading that philanthropic mindset across the organization. And three, it's the leadership, the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach, whichever way you look at it, leadership at several different levels. Those are the three things that I see are very important for corporate organizations. Having worked at Salesforce, what advice would you have for, other C-suite leaders, CEOs on, creating such a culture within their organizations and focusing on philanthropy apart from, the bottom line revenues and the metrics and, doing things that please your shareholders?
Yeah, that's a very insightful question. And, I've been thinking about it a lot in terms of, do we attract a certain kind of talent and are they building the culture? Or is it that, that it's because of the leadership that people who come to Salesforce then become more oriented? It's certainly a dynamic relationship. And first of all, I'd like to definitely share that social impact has very much been a part of Salesforce's history. So even when Salesforce was founded, there was this notion of putting aside 1% of our equity for social good. And very early in Salesforce's history, this 1-1-1 model developed where we're giving 1% of our equity, 1% of our people's time, and 1% of our product to social good. So I would encourage leaders to think about building social impact into their model very early. It is not an afterthought. Corporate social responsibility doesn't come later at a certain point of scale. It should really be built into the model and should leverage the strengths of whatever that corporation is, the industry in which they play. That's super important. I do think this culture of allowing or creating space for employees to self-organize, to go after causes, to share their thoughts, all of that sort of democratization of impact within a corporation is very important. And increasingly so, I see leaders not just looking at their financial scorecard, but also looking at metrics that speak to social impact, whether it's around diversity and inclusion or it's around other sort of areas like carbon footprint, etc. So I think having that notion of sort of building it into your business model and looking at business value from as something beyond profit is very, very important. And I'm seeing it more and more. So that's where my answer lies.
So what is one thing that you love about working for Salesforce that attracted you in the first place?
Yeah, excuse me. Definitely the commitment to social impact, but I think more than that, the way it manifests. So really, the cultural element. It is like you can feel it in everything, sort of around .org and around Salesforce. So it's not just in the reports. It's really hard to capture. It's like a feeling where you're constantly riding a wave of doing good. We have these Leading Through Change series where we'll see brilliant speakers kind of talk about their impact. We will be engaged with the community. So I'd say that is a huge driver. Our level of engagement with the community, people, our people just going out there, volunteering, lifting up and elevating the voices of our customers who work in social impact, elevating their stories, getting other people rallied around causes. So there's just such a high level of energy around making society and the world around us better and giving back. And it's so interconnected. I think that culture and that community engagement and connection is just very, very exciting. And it's not just in the papers, it's not just in the events, it's ever present and ever constant in my life through my job, which is something I absolutely love.
That's very interesting to hear, Samira, especially when organizations are positioning themselves uniquely in terms of giving back to the society. We need more of these corporate organizations in America, and I'm so glad you're part of this culture.
Yeah, it's super exciting to see some other organizations go there as well. And I love when I hear entrepreneurs who are just starting to build their business thinking about social impact. That is one of the most exciting things to me because I can only imagine what happens as they scale. So it's very much a part of our DNA. And I would say I'd recommend other entrepreneurs also think of it as a part of a company's DNA.
Exactly, because people think about corporate social responsibility more like as an afterthought. It's something that you position yourself very well, you do well from a financial score standpoint, and then you're like, hey, let's add CSR part of the agenda somewhere to make sure we're part of that race as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So let me pivot a little bit into your personal space, and I'm going to wear the hat of your dad for a quick moment. If I'm going to ask you, what is Samira Khan going to do in the next 3 to 5 years? How would you answer that?
Wow, that is the big question these days. Yeah, so I have an entrepreneurial streak for sure. I don't know if it's entrepreneurial yet because I've only tested it in the entrepreneurial capacity. There's a lot of emphasis on change makers in my work. So I'm very interested in empowering not just organizations and businesses and communities, but the individual change maker in some of the most marginalized communities and empowering them by increasing their quality of life. So their access to employment, economic pathways, as well as education, and their overall sort of health and how they contribute and give back to society. I think that, social impact isn't only the monopoly of big brands. It's not only the monopoly of certain communities or certain geographies. It is our shared future. And there's something very key about the Sustainable Development Goals about social impact, which is rooted in this notion for all. We must think about for all to have sort of a sustainable future that is that honors all human life. So I think there's a lot of work to be done around empowerment and human rights. So I want to find a way, whether internally through something entrepreneurial or sort of externally, to really do that, to give back and empower the individual. I think some of the key levers of change include social entrepreneurship, include unique ways of financing entrepreneurs, sort of this venture capital, venture philanthropy space, includes connecting entrepreneurs, working on relevant problems to one another and systems change. So there's different levers that could be pulled. I think I'm still figuring out, given my strengths, my background, how other people see me, which lever I'm going to pull, but it is this notion of the individual change maker, their sort of quality of life, and shifting everyone's mindsets so that we are really thinking about the world in terms of for all and human rights, and each life is sort of equally important. There are many marginalized communities that don't even make it to mainstream media in terms of their problems. The Uyghurs, for example, in China, that's an example. I mean, it's for me, it's some form of genocide. That's not sort of elevating to a certain level. So how do I really be the champion, given all I've been sort of lucky to have to represent some of those really marginalized communities that people don't look at? Is that
That's yes, it is. It's always nice to hear, what the long term or the short term plans are for my guests, especially. Now, let me ask you this, Samira. As a mother of three little daughters, what advice would you give to them as they're growing up to be the best versions of themselves?
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. Part of it relates to the other question you asked is, where do I see myself in 3 to 5 years? I really like your question because I think we need more role models and we need to elevate female change makers who are absolutely changing society today. Some are very much known and some are less known. They're like literally embedded in the communities. So how do we elevate their stories? I mean, they are our heroes, but maybe not recognized that way. So that is something that I want to work into my 3 to 5 year plan, sort of just taking a step back. To answer your specific question, I just am very focused on trying to figure out what they're passionate about and encouraging them. So it's not a short answer, but encouraging them to do whatever they're most passionate about, just like I had the opportunity from my father to a certain point, to do whatever I'm most passionate about. So I really just, I want them to be fearless. I want them to dig into their passion and I want them to take more risks. I think females can be more risk averse because of circumstances, because of society, because of culture. So I would say it's along the lines of being bold, digging into your passion and taking risks earlier than I did, let's say.
Those are three amazing, nuggets, which I'm quite sure the kids, as they continue to grow, will feel very proud about their mom.
I'll say I'm learning from them too. I think children these days are just very empathetic and attuned to the environment. Like they will say, why are we using plastic? And these are not things I've taught them. I think we're also kind of some children are growing up in a different society or the world. There's this notion of youth change makers. I mean, my children are very young, but they still talk about the environment differently than I did as a child. They do care about what is just, what is fair. And empathy is very much becoming a part of school curriculum. So I think there's an interesting shift happening in the education system as well. That is certainly a bright spot.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And you see, the kids are more emotionally intelligent. You don't have to, literally explain too much about, what's happening around you. They're very observant and they're quick to adapt, uh, which which feels like, hey, we need to grow up as fast as they're growing and catching up with them sometimes.
Yeah, true.
So let me ask you this, Samira. You've had a very successful career, and thanks for sharing your short-term strategy for the next 3 to 5 years. But how do you handle low moments in life when things don't go the way you expect it to be?
Yeah. So it depends on how low the moment is. If it's just a challenge that I'm facing, that's more near term, that is solvable, I will try to obviously just dig in and, focus on that. But, generally I'll turn to the arts. Music is one. Up and coming artists, I get very inspired by up and coming musicians. There's this new app, Clubhouse, and there's all these up and coming musicians sharing their new music. And so I'm inspired by hope and sort of dreams and the arts in particular. So visual arts, music, a lot of music, all kinds of music. I would say that's the main way. I kind of just turn to the arts.
I agree with that because as STEM professionals, it's STEAM, right? You have science, technology, engineering, art, and math, and art and humanities really help you become a better person in terms of how we look at situations in life.
Yeah, definitely. Different perspective.
I know. So we have a fun rapid fire round for you. Are you ready for it?
I think so, yes.
All right. So you tell us the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the following, and in one word: role model.
Layla Jana.
You're the second person who's actually mentioned her name.
Really?
I had another guest, Salima Villani, who's also an innovator,
Yeah.
and her role model was Leila as well.
Yeah, I know it's a one word. I could speak about that, but it's a one word sort of rapid fire thing, so I won't go into it. But that's interesting to me.
What does happiness mean to you?
Loving and being loved. So love.
How do you define success?
Oh gosh. It's gonna sound cliched, but living in your truth.
What is one fun thing about Samira that's exclusive to our listeners?
Yeah. So back in the day, I wanted to be in drama, like Pakistani drama serials or etc. And I didn't really pursue it, but that was something I had. And I was also scouted for a few Indian pageants way back in the day. So this was like 12 years ago.
Hey, that's very impressive. See, you could have had another career. I mean, it's not too late. What is your native language and one word to describe yourself in it?
So my native language is English, and I didn't realize I had to choose an English word. I know you had mentioned that this might come up. So kintsugi is actually the word that I would that resonates with me, and it's a Japanese word. Happy to explain it. Should I explain it?
Sure, you should.
Yeah, so it's when basically pottery is broken and it is rebound with gold, and it's the notion that even broken pottery can look beautiful. So I think I'm constantly in this mode of breaking and repairing myself, but with each sort of event, I'm getting stronger and stronger. I don't know about more beautiful, but stronger and stronger. So that's how I like to view sort of my life to date.
And can you say that word again for us?
It's kintsugi. I don't know if
Kintsugi.
yeah, Kintsugi. So I might not even be pronouncing it correctly, but I've seen it all over, and I think it's just such a beautiful concept.
That's something that I've learned today. And that's a wonderful analogy. I think that brings the artistic person in you. Well, thank you so much, Samira. We have some closing thoughts from our listeners. We have Satya who says, very interesting and impressive interview. Keep it up. Thank you, Satya. Thanks for hanging out with us. Samira, what are the parting thoughts you have for our listeners today?
Yeah, I really, really want to stress upon this point of being bold. I think we're in certain challenging times today, and we need to start to step out of our comfort zones. So I am doing everything I can to really be bold and stand up for populations and people that I think need a voice. So I would say use your voice and be bold. And I think that will help you live in your truth. At least it's helped me. So that's all I have to share. Thank you so much, Priyanka.
Thank you, Samira. It was such a pleasure having you on the show. And the call to action that we have for our listeners is to subscribe to our CurryUp Leadership YouTube channel. Do you have something to add there, Samira?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to do that at the very end because I really love the way Priyanka is elevating Asian voices. So I would encourage you to subscribe, check out her episodes. And Priyanka, I do have a question for you. Maybe not in this form, but maybe a different form. What's inspired you to create this series? Because it's a super exciting series.
Thank you so much, Samira.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Samira, for kind words. I've never shared it with our listeners as to why I'm doing what I'm doing. But just as a quick sneak peek, hopefully, I think I should delve into this a little bit deeper. But for me, Samira, being part of the Washington, D.C. tech space, I felt there's always a vacuum to spotlight Asian stories. And I got this idea almost like 2 years ago. And then one day I decided I looked at my strengths, just like you mentioned. One was my love for being very curious about people. That's something that I've always been doing. And the second aspect is my love for being a storyteller. I've been a storyteller since the age of 5 when I started talking about what an airplane means. So I have a history of being on stage since the age of 5 for the last quarter century or more, I should say. And the third aspect is, amplifying Asian voices, as you can see, a lot of global societal issues that are happening. Bringing in more stories, especially of budding entrepreneurs, budding leaders, that gives them more confidence about their stories worth sharing. And I think that serves as a role model for a lot of other Asians in the diaspora as well. So those are the 3 main reasons why I do what I do. And I enjoy this medium. I think as a storyteller, as a distinguished Toastmaster, podcasting is just a perfect platform for me to meet my wonderful family of listeners across the globe. Thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, I love it. So please subscribe. And I'm looking forward to seeing where this goes and looking at future episodes as well, or listening to.
Thank you so much. And to our listeners, that was Samira Khan, social tech change maker at Salesforce. And I hope you are inspired by the work she has been doing so far, and you look at her as a role model for the Asian diaspora. 3 takeaways on this episode 105 with Samira Khan, social tech change maker. 1, be bold. 2, look at your STEM profession from an arts perspective. And that's a beautiful way in which she talked about the Japanese pottery example. You look at broken pottery from a sense that not it's just that it's broken, but look at the strength it has to reincarnate itself. And 3, social impact is our shared future. And it's time for every corporate organization in America to look beyond its financial scorecard and think about how they are using philanthropy to make the society a better place. Thank you so much, Samira, for your time and for hanging out with us on a Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you. And to our listeners, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. We'll be live again next Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time every Sunday. And we have an interesting guest, Stephen Kong, who's the CEO of CurryUp, who's going to join us next week as well. So stay tuned and subscribe to our CurryUp Leadership Podcast page on YouTube if you're watching us there. To all our LinkedIn family members, give us a like and follow me, Priyanka Komla, and our CurryUp Leadership Podcast page on LinkedIn. To our podcast lovers, give us a review and a rating so we know that this podcast has helped us become a better version of yourself. And I have a quick shout out for our streaming partners on this special episode. Thank you, Restream, for partnering with us. And we love the wonderful streaming that's happened with our colorful graphics. So it was just a pleasure trying out a new technology too. Thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the day.